question I had for Eric was, so you're in a slightly different situation because you work with students in your capacity as a librarian. So you typically meet with them only once. So how do you engage with students? That is something that comes up consistently in your file. So how do you engage with students in just that one meeting?
Miracle. No, I think that's the challenge for as a faculty librarian is to connect with a student in that 1 hour or an hour and 15 minutes and hope that you can make an impression and cover the material that you need to, and know that the possibility that you will never see them again. Or if you do, it won't be face-to-face, it will be in an email conversation or a phone call, or they will walk away with something that they'll say, well, I know now how to find information, but I can ask somebody else. So they've hit the plateau of knowing how to find something, but they need additional assistance, and I hopefully have guided them or told them where they can find that assistance, and then they can take it further. But as for the connection part, that's very difficult in the sense that within that 60 minutes, I have to disarm them from their preconceived notions of what a librarian is, and sitting behind a desk and reading all day, to the reality that we are here to help. And there are times, and it depends on the audience, I find it very helpful for undergraduate students and to inform them that they are not numbers, that they are people here at campus, and while we do have a large student body, that they are not to feel that they are part of just a big, massive student body, but they are individuals, and that there are people on campus, from faculty to staff and administration, that does care for them, and we want them to succeed. And in that point, I think, in talking to them, I use humor. I use humor a lot. But I realize that the humor has to change because, as I'm realizing as I get older, the jokes that I used to tell 3-4 years ago no longer apply anymore. So I have to stay on top of music trends and artists, and just so I can build a connection. And it's that connection to what a student or an individual hears out of the world, that I can apply it somehow, bridge it, or make a connection within the classroom that they will say, oh, I remember. And hopefully make it somewhat entertaining. And they're not saying I'm, juggling, fire sticks up at the front, but it's trying to understand that I was there once. I understand it can be boring, but hopefully I can talk to somebody and say something that it clicks, and that they walk away and say, you know what, I remember him. Now, they won't remember the name, most likely. That's why I wear the bow tie. It's another way of, I consider it like the Madeleine Albright approach of wearing brooches. She wore a brooch for an occasion. That's where the bow ties come in, is I wear bow ties for the audience. So if I'm teaching with education students, definitely I'm going to have this, an educational bow tie with little, kids playing or something. But if it's for business, it's going to be targeted towards the business students. But no matter what it is, they'll remember the bow tie because not that many people wear bow ties. And hopefully I've said something to make them realize that I am available, I am accessible. And while I know working with my fellow colleagues within the library and outside the library, and the faculty members make themselves accessible, I think that the challenge for me is to make them have the students realize that when they do meet with me, I'm not just there for that one class. I'm there for their entire tenure here while at CSUN, and that they feel comfortable to come back. And then I've even told a few students, if I do not know the information, I will find that for you. I will find the person that can help you. Because by no stretch of the imaginations do I know it all. I would like to, but no.
One of Eric's points, I think, is a salient one. You have to meet students where they are. And it reminded me of something that I failed to answer as a trend over the last 40 years. And it was struck home to me today when I was coming up the elevator. Two female students were madly texting away on their iPhone 4s. And I looked up and said, gee, what did people do in elevators before they had iPhones? And without missing a beat, one of the girls looked up at me and said, I don't know, I wasn't here before there were iPhones. And I think that's a classic kind of definition of where we have to meet students. They're coming from a different environment. We're in a transition environment. Some of the younger folks have been socialized along with the students into a world of technology. Some of us older folks have not. And we've had to pick up the gauntlet and either accept that change or reject it. And some of us are Luddites and some of us aren't. But the fact of the matter is, it's a trend that has been accelerating, not only in education, but all around the world in all manner of things. And I think one of the biggest trends I'm seeing overlaying all of these demographic issues is that we have, meaning the faculty and administration, have accepted technology as the new form of education. Students seemingly have accepted technology as the new form of education. But I don't think we've gotten to the nexus of those things yet. And therefore, as my lawyer friends will tell me, you're assuming facts, not in evidence. We're going headlong into something that has not had the same kind of critical thinking and judicious dialogue that needs to have or needs to take place before we initiate these kinds of huge administrative costs to present a new format that may or may not be yet regulated. So as somebody who tried to put my toe in the waters 15 years ago about this and found what little piece I found, despite the fact that I very precisely tried to say that this is not about online learning as much as it is about collaboration, the overwhelming response to that small piece was, no, it's not. It's about online learning. And in fact, I got frustrated after a few people had written that to me, and I wrote back and I said, what is it you don't understand about the last sentence in my paper? And it's clear that you sort of perceive things from the position that you're in, and a lot of people were poised at that time, and still are poised this time, to accept technology without evaluating it. And so I think that's one of the challenges of the present day university environment. How do we take this overlay of something much larger than what's happening in education and try and match it to and evaluate it within the confines of what we do in and out of the classroom? So another piece of the puzzle.
Cheryl?
Well, I always love stories, so I won't point to any one of you, but if you have in mind a story of a time when you faced one or more students who were clearly engaged elsewhere or disengaged, I would love to hear a story of how you reeled that student back in or reconnected or got, a conversion narrative is what I'm asking for. It was like this, and then what did you do or what happened to bring the student back to where you thought you were and they should be? If that's a clear question, I'm done.
Well, I do a lot of hands-on work in my classes, and when you do hands-on work, there's always possibilities for secret texting and things like that. So what I do is I reconnect them by asking them a question. I reconnect them by proximity, so I'll wander by and kind of see what they're up to, and I'll say, oh, well, what do you think about this photo, or what do you think about this artifact? How does it relate to? So I try to bring them back gently. If it's someone who continues to kind of do that kind of situation where they're either texting or they're on their computer, I'll chat with them in my office hour and just say, I'm just curious, what is it that you're doing that is not really connecting to what we're doing in class? So I try to be as gentle as possible at first, and then I get kind of medieval in my office. Nicely medieval, but just trying to bring them back to, what would happen, or I would put a question to them, what would happen if you're in a classroom and I'm teaching teachers? So what would happen if a student whipped out their phone or, or a game or something? It used to be, little handheld games in elementary school. How would you handle that? what would your reaction be? Kind of turn it on them and see what they would say. And they usually end up saying, oh, I'm really sorry, I just needed to. And I'm like, okay, well, if it's really an emergency, you can step up. So I try to be gentle with those.
I can give you a more macro version of this. In fact, I think it's the essence of what I feel makes my classrooms different. It's clear that to be effective, you have to engage students. How you engage students, however, varies all over the board. I have found that the best way to engage students is to integrate them into a peer network where they don't follow the professor and they don't do things because of the professor. They follow their peers and they do things because of their peers. I think it's eminently more effective in getting to the bottom on certain things. And I'll tell you one of about 20 I could, but this one particularly stands out in my mind. One could argue that through no fault of her own, one of my students had just zoned out. She was just gone. She had failed the first 2 quizzes. She was on her way to failing the class. Very nice gal, but just not there. And so I brought her into my office one day and I started talking to her and I engaged her on a level that wasn't a student-professor level. Some argue that this is not protocol, but I find it very effective. I approached her on the basis of a friend and I said, what seems to be the problem? You're just gone. And after a few minutes of talking, I felt more like a therapist than a professor. But she broke down and told me a whole bunch of things that I probably didn't need to know, but she had been abused as a kid. She was in an abusive relationship. She was having trouble with her parents, and there were just a dozen of these things overlapping to create this kind of environment. And I said, well, look, I don't pretend to think that I can solve these problems for you, but we do have something we need to do in this class, and that is to get you through with a passing grade. So I said, let me work on this, and you meet with me next week. So after she had left the class, I asked the rest of the students to stay, which was an interesting way of doing things in the first place. But I said to them, we have a problem. We collectively have a problem. One of our students, Linda was her name, is having a problem, set of problems, never mind what it is. She's just having problems. She's not here, she's not doing the homework, she's not doing the reading, she's not attending the office hours, and all the things that we expected them to do. So I turned it over to the class. I said, what do you suggest? I said, I'm going to go back in my office. I'll give you 10 minutes. When I come back, let me know what you finally decided. And when I came back, I should say much to my surprise, but I've seen it happen too often to really be surprised by it. They came back with a very coherent plan about how they were going to divide the class into 4 groups. One of the group was going to be responsible for calling her each day of the week. Another group was going to be responsible for going and picking her up and bringing her to the office hours if needed. A third group was going to be responsible for going over the materials with her and making sure that she had finished the readings and understood them. And a fourth group was going to be working with her on the problems. And I said, boy, that sounds like a real logistic nightmare. Are you sure you guys are up to it? And they said, absolutely. So over the next 4 or 5 weeks before the final, these kids kicked into high gear. Linda was at every review session. She was at every office hour. I would talk to her periodically every week or two, and she would tell me what everybody was doing to help her. And long story short, by the end of the semester, she got a B+ on the final. She ran up to me at graduation last year, June with the year graduation, and I heard her scream, and I turned around, she just jumped on me, and I said, Linda, what's happening? And she was so excited because notwithstanding what she was going through that year, she had just been accepted to law school. And it was probably the miracle of all miracles, 180-degree turn. But it was fairly typical, maybe not that grandiose, but fairly typical of the kinds of things that when you get a peer network working together as opposed to a professor working with the class, you have very subtle changes in the dynamics, and that's a perfect example of what it is.